Guten Morgen, wie geht's? Как дела? So, I read 4 books. These are the last 4 books I read. Very wide subjects. The first one is On Killing. So I reviewed this book. There's a video somewhere on my channel. It's a good book. This field in particular of like the psychology of killing and warfare has a lot of a lack of literature, and so this book was pretty systematic, gave a good coverage of it, and I enjoyed it. And if you're interested in the subject of, let's say, the psychology of warfare or like being a soldier or killing, I'd recommend reading this. He writes well and incorporates some academic psychology into it. So yeah, it's a good book. I recommend this book. That's one book I read. Another book I read was Bogle on Mutual Funds. So Bogle has a bunch of books. And my suspicion when I read Bogle was I was concerned that it was going to be a very bad investing book, like a generic one. Maybe not a generic one, too basic, okay? Let's say too basic. For example, there's the book that everybody reads, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is, first of all, I don't like the guy's writing style, it's very bad. But the second of all, it's very generic, basic stuff. And that's not what I wanted from this. I wanted to read about mutual funds, because I bought a bunch of books on mutual funds. I wanted to get woke on this stuff. Thankfully, however, the book is actually good, to my surprise. So he goes over a lot of data sets for stocks. He talks about the long-term growth of, say, stocks versus mutual funds versus, let's say, a bond. He even went over that for like a 100-year period. He talked about something that was really important for mutual funds in particular, is because they're not going to, most mutual funds don't pay out a dividend, and so you have to be careful about expenses because your returns can be chewed up by expenses. And he even showed, let's say, bottom tier mutual funds with lower expenses outperforming top tier mutual funds in terms of returns, because the top tier mutual fund might return 9%, bottom tier might return, say, 5% or 6%, and the bottom tier mutual fund might have an expense of, let's say, 0.35, so like, and the top tier might have the expense of, say, 3.5. So you can see how the expenses would eat into your returns, and he gave a good example of that. Yeah, this book is terrific if you want to get into mutual funds. I think it's probably the best starting point for mutual funds, and I'm glad I got it first. That's not what I meant. This is a book by a linguist. So the book started off by her saying how communication broke her marriage, like communication patterns broke her marriage. It's about conversational styles. It wasn't anything too new for me because I've studied like philosophy of language, and a lot of that came with discourse analysis. So that stuff wasn't that new to me, and I've studied linguistics before, like sociolinguistics, so they talk about this stuff. I think if you want to get like a good overview of how like framing, how reading implications that aren't there, how that stuff can impact your communication, I think this would be a good book for you. It's written very well, actually. I have all of her books, and I didn't realize she was such a good writer. So if you want to see how communication plays a significant role in your life, read this book. But it's generic, basic, not much to say about it. On Crimes and Punishment, this book I have to ask people if they're talking about the writer. I think it's Dostoevsky, or one of those two Russian guys. This was a good book. If you've studied law, then a lot of the things in here already you're going to see have been implemented or have been changed to be more in line with these kinds of morals and values. It's kind of a jurisprudence book, philosophy of law, and it was written well. The concepts in here, though, yeah, like if you study law, they're not going to be new to you. So, for example, like the abolishment of capital punishment, and how the capital punishment, like he says, isn't a proportionate response because it does more harm than good, it makes society more brutal. He talks about torture, how torture shouldn't be allowed, again, because it's too brutal and so it's not proportionate. All this kinds of things. Even torturing witnesses. Sometimes people would do that. I know in Rome they did that. Tiberius, the emperor of Rome, used to torture people for confessing to crimes if they didn't confess accurately enough or to his taste want. Yeah, it goes over stuff like this, right? Good book, written well. I would recommend it, but don't expect like anything groundbreaking in it. So those are the last 4 books that I've read. I have 4 more books that I'm currently reading, and so that will be the first 4 out of 1,000 books that I'm going to read. That being said, gule gule.